Welcome everyone to the Saturday edition of our Packers News live chat. Alongside Tom Silverstein, I'm Olivia Reiner. The Packers hosted their final practice today leading up to their Monday night game against the Atlanta Falcons. We'll bring you the latest on the injury statuses of wide receiver Davante Adams and defensive lineman Kenny Clark in just a moment. However, as always, Twitter, Periscope, and Facebook friends I suppose Periscope and Twitter are the same. YouTube friends as well. All of you, all three of our platforms that we're streaming to today. If you're over there, leave us a question down in the chat. Tom and I want you to take some control of our conversation today. We'll get to some of your questions in just a bit. Tom, wide receiver Davante Adams, participated in today's practice. It's his third consecutive practice that he's been participating in a limited capacity as he's dealing with a hamstring injury. However, he said he's not going to play until he is 100% healthy. He's questionable to participate in Monday night's game. How likely is it that Adams is healthy enough to play on Monday?
Well, I got to think that after practicing him for all of this week and I believe part of last week, that he's probably close. If there was any kind of setback, he wouldn't be practicing. So my guess is they've been pointing to this all along. It could surprise me. They could, maybe come out there on Monday and it's a cold night and they sort of feel like it's a little bit just the situation just isn't right and they don't want to take a chance. But I would say that he's probably on track to play.
The Pack is looking a little shaky at wide receiver. Tom, Packers wide receiver Allen Lazard has been placed on IR with a core injury. Adams is questionable to play on Monday night. Tom, if Adams doesn't play or he's on limited snaps, how likely is it that the offense is able to produce as much as it's done through 3 weeks?
Well, it's hard. You take away the top two wide receivers, and I mean, that goes without saying that you're not going to be the same team. But we've talked about it some here and elsewhere. They have to just replace it with tight ends and running backs, and they got to diversify what they do. I think Tyler Ervin has to have a bigger role, and they're going to have to get something out of Darius Shepard. It's that's the nature of the league. Everybody's missing somebody, and you got to figure out ways to make up for it. So maybe they don't score 40 points, but they got to figure out how to get in the end zone a number of times.
Just like Adams, head coach Matt LaFleur is taking a similar approach with defensive lineman Kenny Clark, who's been dealing with a groin injury since week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. Clark is also going to be a game time decision, and he's also questionable for the game against the Falcons. What does Matt LaFleur need to see from Clark in the next 48 hours to make him feel confident that he's ready to go on Monday?
I sort of get the sense that he's going to play. He sort of gave you that sense. I mean, he said it's up to the doctors and all of that. But, I mean, he's been practicing for 2 weeks. And if they were really worried about that groin injury, I don't think they would have had him practicing every day. I think it would have been kind of spotty, one day here, one day there. I would think that he's going to play.
Yesterday, Tom, we noted that rookie quarterback Jordan Love did not participate in practice because he was dealing with an undisclosed illness. He returned to today's practice after dealing with that illness. Clearly, it was not COVID related. However, punter J.K. Scott was not at practice today, also with an illness. How cautious are the Packers being with all illnesses as we get closer and closer to cold weather?
Yeah, I mean, I asked LaFleur this too today, and guys are going to get colds. Guys may get the flu. They may have an upset stomach or have their sinuses are bothering them, and they're going to report it. And the medical staff is going to be very, very careful and tell them to go home until they get the adequate test results back to make sure it's not COVID. But as LaFleur said, it used to be if you're not feeling well, you stayed home and you missed all the meetings and preparation. But these guys now that they're so used to doing everything through Zoom that they don't really miss out that much. They just get to stay home and relax, try to get better, and also, but they can still study on what the game plan is.
Scott is one of 9 players questionable for Monday night's game against Atlanta. Other questionable players besides Davante Adams and Kenny Clark include outside linebackers Zadarius Smith, outside linebacker Rashawn Gary, cornerback Jair Alexander, center Corey Linsley, tight end Josiah DeGuara, running back Tyler Irvin, and of course J.K. Scott. 9 players total. Tight end Mercedes Lewis is doubtful. He has been out. He hasn't been practicing all week. And of course, also there's both inside linebacker Christian Kirksey and wide receiver Allen Lazard. They have been ruled out. Both of them have been placed on injured reserve. Tom, what is the timeline for both Kirksey and Lazard on IR?
Well, so they have to sit out a minimum of 3 games, but we knew that already with Lazard, that it was probably going to be a 4 to 6 week injury after having core muscle surgery, and it could be longer than that. Wide receivers, it typically takes them a little bit longer, so it could be into November, late November, before Lazard comes back. Maybe if they're lucky, it's only 5 weeks, maybe. Kirksey, we have to see. I mean, I don't think we've really been told, or it hasn't been reported what exactly is wrong and whether they feel like he needs surgery or if he needs to just lay off. We saw him at practice every day this week, which usually is a sign that it's not too serious. But it's possible they just felt like he's not going to be ready, or he's going to need to get it repaired. If he needs to get it repaired, then, boy, I don't know. He's a guy who hasn't played. I think he's played, 2 games in the last 2 years, and they knew injury were going to be an issue or could be an issue with him. And so they're going to have to move forward with Ty Summers and Chris Barnes, and then they got a shot at getting Kamal Martin back after the bye.
Let's flip it over to Facebook. We'll start with Southwest Florida Packers fan club, continuing on the conversation of depth at inside linebacker. They ask who starts at inside linebacker on Monday. Tom, you said it yourself. Inside linebackers, Ty Summers and Chris Barnes are the top 2 receivers in that room. Both of them played in last week's game on Sunday against the New Orleans Saints. Summers came in for Kirksey, and he was the one wearing the green dot, the communication helmet in that defense. How confident are the Packers in those 2 that they can start in Monday night's game?
Well, I mean, they have to. They played against New Orleans, and it was good enough to win. Summers, I think, has a chance to be okay. I think, there's limitations with him, but I think as he gets more instinctual and comfortable in the defense, he will be able to use his smarts to be in the right place. And Chris Barnes has shown some athletic ability. Now, the Falcons are going to recognize who's there, and they're going to try to hurt the Packers with crossing routes and picks and matchups with tight ends, anything they can with those inexperienced linebackers. One thing, so they have Barnes, they have Summers, Warren Burks, he's there if they need him. But they've sort of used Zadarius Smith in the middle a little bit more as that roving position, and he's almost like an inside linebacker there. So I know that's been used mostly on passing downs, but they've done it on early downs too. And so, they may just feel that they have people to handle it, at least until Kamal Martin gets back.
Taking a look at the offense's injury issues is Joan here. Joan wants to know, is Kenny Clark coming back, and who's placing wide receiver Allen Lazard? Going back, as we said earlier in our show, Clark is questionable to play in Monday night's game. He will be a game time decision. And then with Lazard, Tom, there's a number of other receivers that are currently on the 53-man roster, including Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Malik Taylor, and Darius Shepard. Plus, the Packers have the flexibility of bringing up 2 players from the practice squad to the active roster on game day. We don't know who those players are going to be. However, they could be wide receivers. Who is likely to get a newfound opportunity with Lazard out?
Well, this is the part where you wish you could see practice, because we don't really get to see how guys are performing. in team drills. But, one possibility is Reggie Begelton, who was in camp, and they kept him around for a reason. He's got some experience playing in the CFL, and I'm sure he's an option. They got the other kid, Foster, who can fly. Maybe they've seen something out of him that they feel like they can get. But either way, those guys are not going to be saviors. They're not going to come in and have 10 catches. They're going to have to do it with Valdez-Scantling, with Shepard. I mean, Malik Taylor's going to have to help out a little bit. So, Tyler Urban, as I keep saying over and over again, he's going to have to be a factor. I do expect them to bring somebody up, though.
As head coach Matt LaFleur said just a few days ago about Allen Lazard's injury, it's certainly unfortunate. However, it is an opportunity for another player to step up and get some reps with the offense. Thank you so much, Joan, for your question. Let's take a question here from Thomas. Thomas wants to know, who will the Packers add to the 53-man roster after placing inside linebacker Christian Kirksey and wide receiver Allen Lazard on injured reserve? Tom, who is most likely to get the call up to be permanent on the active 53?
Well, that's a good question. Now, we know the Packers are okay with not filling roster spots when they're open, not paying somebody to just be inactive. So we very well could see them not fill those positions. I mean, it's Saturday. They could do something tomorrow, a Sunday, but maybe they just leave them open and they bring up two guys from the practice squad and see how they do there. I don't think they absolutely have to add anybody, especially, every time they get this chance to bring two guys up to the practice squad, from the practice squad, it means they don't have to have somebody on the 53. So maybe they just leave that open and see how that goes.
Russ Ball saving money for all of his 2021 free agents by not filling every single spot on the 53-man roster, at least right now.
The other thing it does, too, is it keeps continuity on your roster. You don't bring a guy up and then all of a sudden you decide, oh, shoot, we got another injury. Now let's cut this guy and bring someone else in. And then he's exposed to waivers, or he maybe goes to someone else's practice squad. It just gives you a little bit more continuity not to do it that way. So they seem to be fine in terms of roster. So we'll see. I would bet that they bring two guys up, though.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for your question. Let's take this question here from Pam. Pam asks, is wide receiver Equanimeous St. Brown eligible to come back from injured reserve by Monday? He is. He was placed on injured reserve before the start of the season, meaning that he has been out for more than 3 games now. However, he hasn't practiced at all. How likely is it that St. Brown comes off of IR before Monday's game?
No, not without having practiced. No chance. So I sort of get the feeling that they're waiting till after the bye, giving him a lot of time. But he hasn't practiced. We've seen him in the Hudson Center, and I haven't even seen him running routes. So, no, that's not going to happen.
Similarly, Matthew wants to know if there's any news on inside linebacker Kamal Martin, who was also placed on injured reserve prior to the beginning of the regular season. He has been present at practice. Like St. Brown, he has not participated in practice. However, Tom, how likely is it that Martin is back after the Week 5 bye?
I think it's a possibility. He had, from most reports, he had a torn meniscus. It really kind of depends on some guys have come back really quickly from that. Some, it can be 6 weeks, some it's 4. I think I would bet there's a chance he's back at practice when they come back from the bye. He's been doing stuff on the sideline that looks beyond a guy who's just trying to stay in shape. He looks like they're trying to get him ready. So I would bet that there's a chance he'll be at practice when we return from the bye.
Thank you, Matthew. Let's take Todd's question here. Todd would like the scoop on tight end Josiah DeGuara. DeGuara has been practicing in a limited capacity for the past couple of days. He's been dealing with an ankle injury since week 1. He sustained it in-game against the Minnesota Vikings, and he's been out the last 2 games. How likely is it that he plays on Monday?
Well, I think I'm not a doctor, but I think this is a high ankle sprain. Just the way they've taped it, it's gone up his shin. And I know they initially listed him as a shin. And that tells me that it probably is a high ankle sprain. And those things are tough. They're really tough to come back from. And, they're known to keep guys out for 6 weeks. I think they're just seeing how much he can handle at this point. He did practice 2 days in a row. I think 2 days in a row. And that's a good sign. He might be able to come in there and give them some help. The other decision they have is, their tight ends aren't playing that bad. Maybe they sit him one game. But don't forget, Mercedes Lewis is doubtful with a knee injury. And so then they're just down to Tanyan and Sternberger. So I think if they can, they're going to want DeGuara if he can play. They have Lovett too. I mean, I guess you can count him as a tight end as well.
Certainly, if Mercedes Lewis and DeGuara both don't play, expect to see a little bit more of tight end John Lovett, who the Packers signed off the practice squad last week. Thank you, Todd, for your question. Let's flip it over to Mark, who has more wide receivers questions. This sort of encapsulates a sentiment that I'm seeing a lot in our chat. Is the salary cap preventing the team from trading for a big name wide receiver? Tom, we've got a lot of other questions asking about certain players. Would the Packers go out and try to sign X guy off the free agent market or trade for a certain player? Why haven't the Packers done that yet?
Well, because it could cost them David Bakhtiari or Aaron Jones. And do you want a guy, probably an aging guy or a guy that another team doesn't want anymore instead of David Bakhtiari or Aaron Jones? I don't think so. So they'll be very careful with anybody that they bring in, trading especially, because you assume that contract if you trade. Now, bringing a guy in off the street is different. You sign him to whatever you want, but you make a trade, and if that guy's got an $8 million base salary, you're taking on that salary. So I think they're just going to try to power through it. And, their offense is playing so well and they're diversified. Maybe they can make it through it without adding anybody.
Thank you, Mark, for your question. Let's move over to Anthony. Anthony asks, what do we think about Atlanta's kicker woes? Young Hoku's groin is on the fritz. He is out of Monday's game. The Falcons have signed kicker Elliott Fry to the practice squad. He is expected to be called up and to the active roster leading up to Monday night's game. How can the Packers take advantage of potentially a kicker issue here, Tom?
Well, I don't know that they can take advantage of it. They can keep their fingers crossed that he misses a bunch in Lambeau Field. It can be a little tricky place to kick, and at night the wind tends to blow a little bit more. They've got to keep their fingers crossed that he's not very good or he's just not ready to play. The one area where maybe they can get something out of it, I don't know. Maybe on kick returns, but really that's really going to be up to Fry. I don't know that there's anything they can do to take advantage of it, but it could wind up being a difference in the game.
Throughout every season, no matter the weather outside, the wind is always doing wacky things outside of Lambeau Field. If Fry has not prepared himself and if he's not ready to play in what will undoubtedly be an interesting scenario inside of Lambeau Field, that might be an issue for the Falcons. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for today's live stream. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back pre-game right back here, so make sure you come back on Monday night. Pete and I will have the pregame. Ryan and I will have the postgame. For Tom, I'm Olivia. We'll see you next time.